Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Hammer Territory podcast. This is episode 157. My name is Brad Rowland, and I'm joined today, as I often am, by my co-host. His name is Scott Coleman. Scott, how are you on a Sunday afternoon?
Hey, Brad, I'm doing great. I am going to knock on every piece of wood within 50 miles of myself before I say what I'm about to say. But so far, it's been about as good of a spring training as you can ask for the Atlanta Braves. Not that wins and losses matter, but they are now 6-2 after winning on Sunday. And the team has been healthy and performing well. And I think some of the questions about the roster that we had coming into the spring, it's been mostly good news there. So again, I promise you, I am not trying to do the podcast jinx on it, but now that we're a couple weeks into the spring, I feel like we're in pretty good shape now as we approach the midway point of being down in Florida.
I think that is all reasonable. And yes, I actually watched you softly knock on wood while you were doing that while we're on YouTube. So it is what it is. But yeah, yes, the Braves it's been going well. It's our first podcast of the month of March. We're not into March officially. This is March if you are a college basketball person, as both Scott and I am. But we should also say at the top of the show, we are part of Foul Territory as a network. We are Hammer Territory. We cover the Braves all year round on this podcast. Usually multiple times a week, even during the dead zone. And then as we wrap up now that there's actually baseball games going on, even more and more action on the show from us. We should also plug, we did a show, not us, it was actually our colleagues, Sean Coleman and Stephen Tolbert on Friday evening. And then also before that, a farm system kind of deep dive that I did with Gore Vidak that was a lot of fun to record. So lots of stuff going on in Braves land. Scott nods at me.
That podcast that you did overshadowing or overviewing the farm system was really, really good. And I highly recommend Gourov's work and all the work over at batterypower.com, especially on the minor league side. And I mean, I was learning something new with basically every player you all talked about, whether it was Drake Baldwin or rising expectations for AJ Smith-Shawver or some of the deeper, maybe sleeper type of prospects in the system who could find themselves in the mix this upcoming season. So highly recommend that prospect deep dive if folks didn't listen to it earlier in the week.
Yeah, that show is available now, and it was not because of me that show was good. Gore was great, and also people should be listening to their podcast. They do a minor league exclusively focused podcast called Peach State Prospects. That's a fun listen as well if you are into that sort of thing. We always admit on the show, I know at least the two of us for sure, we're not prospect guys. We do follow the system, but not in a way that like the scouts do, like Gorov and Garrett Spain, those guys, and our old guy Eric Cole, et cetera, et cetera. But I like to talk to those folks every once in a while, check in a little bit. And of course, spring training is a good time for that because there's a lot of prospects playing baseball this time of year. It's not always the regulars. Even when the regulars play, as we'll get into here in a second, they don't last long in these early games. They might play 3 innings, 4 innings, and then be out of there. So here we are. Scott, not that much to get to today, but still, here we are. It's been a couple days since someone's done this podcast on this feed. They played 2 games since then. You mentioned they've been playing well Saturday and Sunday. I guess our lead topic, if you want to say that, is that you brought this up to me. I think it's the absolutely right thing. The Braves have kind of tipped their hand a little bit when it comes to what their lineup might be for opening day. And it's because of, and that, part of this discussion is left field, which we'll get into in a second, but does that sound reasonable? And it was as your point in the first place, but if you look at their A lineup, that they've only used, I think, maybe once or twice so far with like everybody playing, basically. It looks a lot like a lineup that they might use on March 27th.
Brian Snitker is historically a manager who likes a lot of consistency with his lineup. When he can help it, he has pretty much the same 1 through 8 or 1 through 9 most days. Maybe there's a platoon bat in there that he moves around, or of course, injuries can sway that, as we saw very frequently last year. But based on 2 games this spring, and it is a small sample, but it seems like we have a pretty good idea of what the Braves' regular lineup is going to be, at least while Ronald Acuna Jr. is out. And then even when Ronald comes back, I think Snitker is setting it up to make it really easy to just kind of slide everybody back one spot when they add the former MVP at the top of the order.
Yeah, and that makes total sense to me. We did a little bit of this when they signed Jurickson Profar in particular. Like, hey, where's he going to hit in the lineup? And I think we even, all 4 of us to some degree on different shows, kind of agreed. But I think that Profar has pretty clearly the best like leadoff profile of anyone they have available. It's not Ronald Acuna. He gets on base, and that's something that was like one of the lead factors in acquiring Jurickson Profar is that he gets on base in a way that This lineup does not exactly have a ton of those like on base first guys, and he kind of is that. And he's been leading off in those lineups that were kind of the we think sneak peek lineups. And he's followed up by the power guys, and then you get into your Ozzy Albies, your Michael Harris, etc. What do you make of what they have been doing here? Do you agree with it? Obviously, we don't do a ton of lineup talk anymore. We used to do more of that, honestly, probably 4 or 5 years ago. But it's a good time to kind of peek at it a little bit. Do you agree with this? Because I think you and I do. We're on the same page that Snit, I think, is foreshadowing this a little bit. But do you buy it? Is this something that you would actually do with the lineup?
So in 2 games where the Braves have played most of their regulars, this has been the lineup. Jurickson Profar leading off, Austin Riley second, Matt Olson third, Marcell Ozuna fourth, Michael Harris fifth, Ozzy Albies sixth. And we haven't gotten the full 1 through 9 just yet.
Yeah.
Usually Snit will do that towards the very end of the spring in what is more of like a dress rehearsal for opening day. But you have Profar, Riley, Olson, Ozuna, Harris, Albies, which, funny enough, is switch hitting, right-handed, left-handed, right-handed, left-handed, switch hitting, which
That's on
really
purpose, I
comes
think.
into can be really
Yeah.
beneficial, especially in the late innings when it comes to be a matchup. Maybe you want to bring in a lefty to face Matt Olson, but with the 3-batter minimum, then that lefty has to face perhaps Austin Riley or for sure Marcell Ozuna and even Michael Harris, who is not terrible against lefties. And then we know what Ozzy Albies does against left-handed pitching. So there's a lot of balance there. And then when Ronald Acuna Jr. comes back at some point, you just bounce everybody back one spot. You still have Profars on base at the top of your order. You have Acuna leading off, where he's been leading off basically every day he's been healthy for 5 seasons now. And then you have 2 really good on-base guys when everything is going right with Acuna and Profar ahead of Riley, Olson, Ozuna, Harris, Albies. I mean, that's as good of a 1 through 7 as there is. And then if the Braves get a bounce back from Sean Murphy, which I think we're all hoping for, you're talking about a ridiculous 1 through 8. And then kind of what the Braves have talked about now for 2 seasons. In an ideal world, Orlando Arcia is batting 9th, is a little bit better than what he did last season, and is just not killing you in the bottom of the order because you have really, really good hitters ahead of him. I think this is the way I would do it. I don't know about you, Brad, but this feels like the lineup to me. It takes advantage of your on base at the top. You allow your power guys and Michael Harris and Ozzy Albies to hopefully drive in a million runs behind a really good top of the order. And it's balanced too, as I said earlier. It's not too right heavy, it's not too left heavy. It just feels like the lineup I would go with if I were calling the shots, but maybe you feel differently.
No, we are on the same page for sure. I mean, it's not like they have to be married to the same group every day. You're right, though. Snit does like to do that as much as he can. And occasionally, and that's when it becomes more noticeable. Like when he makes a change, it's actually noticeable because he doesn't make a lot of changes. Like last year, Riley was struggling and he went to 5th. And that was like oh, okay, that was notable. They changed it. Like it's not, he likes to kind of stick with the guns that they kind of come with. And there are, by the way, we will not do this on the show. There are these philosophical things and, kind of the new agey things where, like, for instance, when you and I were kids, I'm a little bit older than you, but, the cleanup hitter was like the big guy, right? Like your best hitter hit cleanup, all this stuff. Then it became third and then it became second. Like it's kind of, this stuff does kind of change depending on what your era is. It's just an old school guy, but obviously there's some consultation there with the analytics guys, with the front office, et cetera. Yeah, but it all makes sense to me. I mean, you want your guys to get on base early. Profar gets on base. Do you want maybe occasionally? Do you want to have Ozzy Albies hit higher in the lineup against the lefty? Sure. Like there's that kind of things that you can do. But generally, yeah, Ronnie leads off, and then I'm fine with Profar hitting second or first. First with Ronnie out for sure. That's the one thing. Maybe not the one thing. There are a few things that I'm pretty rigid on. I am definitely in the lead Profar off until Ronnie gets back camp. I like that decision. He's their best on base guy. And then after that, like, do I care that much about the order that Riley, Olson, and Ozuna are in? Not really, but they're going to be in that 2, 3, 4, 5 mix. The 3 of those guys will be in some order between 2 and 5. We kind of know that. So yeah, it makes total sense to me. And also, they've done this a little bit where at the bottom of the lineup, we all understand that Arcia is their worst hitter. You also could have Arcia hit 8th and slot someone like Michael Harris at 9th. They've done it before. Obviously, Michael Harris is a better hitter than Arcia, but there's one of those preferential things where it's like, do you want to maybe have a quote unquote second leadoff hitter at 9 to kind of flip the lineup? Anyway, there's philosophical questions about that, but I think what you laid up is perfect. It's they have these spots that are They make total sense for all these guys. They have a bunch of power. And I think this lineup that they've been using, as you already said, going back and forth lefty to righty isn't a mandate for me, but it does. When you can do it and it makes natural sense, why not do it? Which
Yeah.
I think is probably how they land at what they've been doing so far.
And we'll see, because it looks like the Braves will see at least a couple of lefties in that first
Yeah.
week or even 2 weeks of the season based on who they're going to face. No, we'll see. Maybe Brian Snitker will do a little bit of tinkering. If it's a really tough lefty, maybe they drop Matt Olson a spot and move Marcell Ozuna ahead of him. And you swap Ozzie Albies and Michael Harris because, again, Ozzie just crushes lefties but is not as strong against righties. So there is some built-in flexibility here. We're going to talk about this a little bit later in the show, but it's also interesting that I think we're leaning towards a platoon with Jared Kelenic and Brian De La Cruz. Of course, one lefty, one righty. Also brings some balance to your lineup. You could pinch hit those guys later on in the game as well. So it seems like after such a frustrating and injury-riddled 2024, you have a new hitting coach in place. God willing, they're going to be healthier than they were a year ago. If they get healthy seasons out of their top 8 hitters in this lineup, or even if 6 or 7 of them stay healthy, it feels like, to me anyway, that the Braves are going to be back at the top of the leaderboards as they were 2 years ago and really just hit the crap out of the baseball.
Yeah, we're a long way from this, but the Padres do have, I think, their top 3, and that's where the Braves play first. If you don't know that, in about 3.5 weeks from now, the Padres do have their top 3 pitchers are all right-handed, so they probably go righty, righty, righty. But the Dodgers have all kinds of options, and they're the second team that the Braves could see. Well, we'll see, and then we'll see if they throw some lefties in there too. But flexibility, and aside from Ozzie, they don't have a ton of guys who are like total platoon split guys. Obviously, there are preferences, but he's really the only one that's like a very, very sharp platoon split guy out of their regulars. We'll get into it. In fact, let's get into it right now, Scott, about this left field situation. We've gotten questions about this. We did discuss it quite a bit when they signed Brian De La Cruz, but that's been like 3 months now, or 2 months at least. So it's I'm sure we have some new listeners coming on board. But the question we keep getting now already is basically, are they going to platoon Kelenic with Brian De La Cruz to begin the season? Obviously, once Roddy comes back, as long as you have Profar, Harris, and Acuna, that is your outfield. Jared Kelenic going to have to sit once everybody's there. But injuries happen, and we know for a while there's that spot open without Ronald Acuna. And Kellenic's been good in the spring, which is why this is coming up even more now. I think Bowman, somebody already wrote about this dedicated a couple weeks ago. Like, is this going to be the plan? And got Snit, and Snit basically said, hey, if you remember last year, we signed Adam Duvall in mid-March. Like, we talked about it a lot a year ago. They were going to go into the season with Kelenic playing every day, and then suddenly he wasn't. Now they have this kind of built-in option, and he's not Adam Duvall as far as being proven, but Brian De La Cruz was kind of, it seemed like, to us anyway, signed to be kind of in this role, maybe a 4th, 5th outfielder, platoon guy. It's obviously super early, and again, he looks good. Kelenic looks really good at this point in time. But are you planning on that? Like, again, 4 weeks from now, do you expect to see a platoon early on in the season?
I think so. And, Brian De La Cruz, as you said, we talked about him quite a bit, but just a quick refresher if folks are maybe tuning in now as we get closer to baseball. Once upon a time with the Miami Marlins, De La Cruz was a pretty good hitter. He had about a 3-season stretch where he was a slightly above average hitter and hit for power and hit the baseball really hard. The reason that he signed a minor league deal this offseason is that since the 2023 All-Star break, De La Cruz has really, really struggled.
Yeah.
He has a 76 WRC plus across quite a few at-bats since midpoint of 2023. For reference, a 76 WRC plus is slightly better than what Orlando Arcia was last season.
Which was bad. In case you forgot that, everybody, he was not very good a year ago.
And Arcia plays good defense, at least. And De La Cruz historically has not graded out very well defensively, although he does have a big arm. Yep. So I think because we know with pretty high certainty at this point, Jared Kelenic is not going to hit left-handed pitching. A career 192 batting average and a 58 WRC plus against lefties. He was actually even worse last season against lefties in a small sample. I think it was like a 49 WRC plus, which is unplayable. And De La Cruz, while not Barry Bonds against left-handed pitching by any means, is a 270 hitter with a career 92 WRC plus against lefties, which is serviceable at least for a couple of weeks while Acuna is out. I'm imagining a platoon of some kind. If either player wants to be so good that you can't fathom taking them out of the lineup, great, all for it. But I think we're leaning towards that. De La Cruz has gotten into the lineup pretty regularly this spring, has had a couple of hard hits as well, which isn't a bad sign by any means. So I imagine we're heading towards a platoon here, at least until Acuna is ready to go.
It makes sense. And look, the other thing is, Kelnick, I think even the Kelnick skeptics probably would acknowledge he's better than De La Cruz on paper.
Yeah.
And he's the strong side of the platoon. So Kelnick is the guy who hits righties better than lefties. You're going to see more righties than lefties. That makes sense. And when, honestly, there might be a stretch, and the Scott, but it might be 2 weeks before you see a left-hand starter. Like you might go forever and see only right-handed starters, which means Kelnick would presumably play almost every day for a while. And again, early in the season, if the Padres, I believe their top 4 starters are all right-handed. So I think they're going to see 3 right-handers to start the season. And presumably that means Kelnick starts. And that makes sense. He's the better player overall. And I do think, while I think we agree on this, I think Kelnick is maybe could get a little bit better against lefties. I'm not saying he's going to, but like he's at the age now and the spot now, like the sample isn't so big against lefties where I'm like, think he's like totally a lost cause, but until you see it, and I wouldn't bank on it, basically is what I would say. Platooning him does make total sense on a team that's trying to win the World Series right now. It's not about developing Jared Kelnick. Obviously you want to, but you want to win games as well. And I think if you ask me, all right, I guess I'll ask you this. If you face a left-handed starter on April 5th of this year, do you want De La Cruz in there or do you want Kelnick in there?
De La Cruz.
I think I agree with you. So, and again, De La Cruz might crash out in the next 3 weeks. That's the other thing. There's no investment in De La Cruz. I don't mean that in a negative way about him, but like if he goes 0 for 50 the rest of the spring and looks terrible, they'll just cut him and sign somebody else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They don't have to keep. It doesn't have to be De La Cruz. It's more about random outfielder X than it is about Brian De La Cruz. At least for me, it's more like you could find somebody. And look, it probably won't be Duvall this time, but they could find somebody in the Duvall mode if they wanted to on March 20th, and we're like, we just have to have somebody to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in a perfect world, the Braves have their big 3 in the outfield for most of the season, and they're not going to need Kelnick or De La Cruz or anybody else. But the likelihood is that somebody is going to get hurt at some point. Hopefully it's more of the 10 or 15-day injured list stint and not 2 months. But Michael Harris has been hurt in both of the last 2 years and missed significant time. Acuna coming back from the knee. I'm guessing even if the Braves are being very diligent and cautious this spring, the likelihood is we're going to be seeing a lineup where Ronald Acuna Jr. is in there and he's going to get scratched 45 minutes before first pitch because his knee is sore or he felt something and they just want to be extra careful and take the day off. And then Kelnick will be in there or De La Cruz if it's a lefty. We'll see how the roster all turns out too, because you can only carry effectively 4 bench players. And if Acuna's there and you have to have a backup catcher and a backup utility man, then it's basically 2 players for the bench. And we'll see where all that is. Probably a discussion for the end of April or early May.
Yeah.
But regardless, I do think, to kind of come full circle, I think we're looking at a platoon. And if the Braves can get average offensive production and good enough defense in right field until their superstar comes back, I think you take it all day long, especially if the 7 guys in the lineup ahead of them are hitting the way that we're hoping they're going to hit.
We agree. And one of the advantages of having Kelnick, even if you don't love him, is that he can play a functional center field defensively too. That allows you to carry only 1 backup outfielder if you have to. Once Ronnie comes back, you can just go with 4 and have Kelnick be your 4th guy. Obviously you're hoping that Michael Harris plays all 162 or whatever they want to do with him. But certainly there's some flexibility there. And yeah, I think 100%, even if I think the Braves have shown so far and said so far, they're probably going to be overly cautious with Ronnie to where when they bring him back, he's going to just go straight to the outfield. He won't have to DH, any of that stuff that we were kind of maybe worried about earlier in the winter. But also, I don't think he's going to be on the Matt Olson play every inning of every game plan, if I had to guess. No. You'll probably see Ronnie take a day off every couple of weeks, something like that. So, notable at this point in time. All right, so we mentioned already a couple things about Saturday's game, but, De La Cruz had 2 hits. That was good to see. It was mostly a bullpen endeavor on Saturday. It was Dylan Lee and Buck Farmer and Jake Diekman. Look, we don't have to go through every single one of these guys pitches, but I have noticed, at least it's been notable to me, a lot of the fringy relievers on the roster, your Farmers, your Diekmans, not Dylan Lee's not this, by the way. Dylan Lee's a different category, but have been pretty good. At least the results have been pretty good.
Yeah.
And it's hard to tell how much of that matters. I'll raise my hand right now and say I'm not going to see every pitch of every game in spring training. It's just not possible when you have a day job and they play at 1:00 in the afternoon. But from what I have seen, in particular, Farmer and Diekman have looked pretty good to my eye. The numbers have said that same story. I know they already assigned Chasen Shreve to AAA, so that was one other guy that was like kind of in the mix. It seemed like as a longtime veteran reliever who's not going to be seemingly in the mix for the opening day bullpen. But anything standing out to you from the relievers at this point in time, or is it just kind of like it's early? We'll see.
If you would have asked me at the very start of spring, when all the pitchers and catchers were showing up, what was my level of concern with the depth in the bullpen? 1 being not a concern in the world, 10 being I am terrified. I was at like a 7.5. I was legitimately concerned. And this was before they added Buck Farmer and Jake Diekman on basically tryout deals.
Yeah.
After a couple of weeks, based on both what I've seen and the stuff from these guys coming out of the bullpen and the results, I'm lower on now. I would say I'm more in like the maybe 5 out of 10 in my concern. I still do worry about the depth of this team. Maybe that's just something I'm going to have to get over because, clearly the front office doesn't necessarily share our sentiments because they have done nothing in terms of adding depth to the pitching staff this offseason, other than those aforementioned couple of minor league deals. But it is encouraging that at least through the first couple of weeks of the spring, guys like Farmer and Diekman and Anderson Pilar has gotten a lot of swing and miss, which is encouraging. Angel Perdomo, the stuff looks good coming back from Tommy John. And then your regulars like Raisel Iglesias just cruised through an inning today on Sunday. Again, little nervous. I worry that if an injury or two happens, it's like, oh, baby, Brad, you got anything left in that arm because you might be on your way to Atlanta. But, injuries, you can't predict them. I mean, we saw last year, sometimes you're healthy, sometimes you're not.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird that I think of the 4 of us, I am the least concerned about the bullpen, which is not normally where I would be. Like I'm usually, honestly, I might be the pessimist of the 4 of us. Maybe you are. I don't know. One of us might win that award, but I don't have the same concern. I'm not saying it's great. I think I said this last week at some point, but they have a lot of bullets to fire at it, and also if it doesn't work, you can find relievers. Like that's kind of where I would be, but. Yeah, it's a small increase. I don't know if I'm where I would be on the 1 to 10 scale. Maybe my worry level is like a 3 or 4. It's not like it's not a 1. I have some concern about the bullpen, but with every encouraging outing, maybe that goes down a little bit, and perhaps having at least 4 guys that you trust, maybe 4.5 with Days Bell is I think that does get underrated. I think by some because bullpens are hard, and most teams, in fact, I don't think there is a team, maybe the Dodgers, but that has more than 4 guys that they actually trust in the bullpen. Spots 5 through 8 in their bullpen on every team, even contenders, is usually not exactly something that you absolutely love. The Braves have been particularly loaded in the bullpen the last couple of years, which has maybe swung a little bit towards this. And honestly, I'll cop to it. I've thought Alex is over invested in the bullpen at times. And maybe they're underinvesting now. Like both can be true at the same time. But if anything, I've been like, hey, probably cool it with the bullpen a little bit, Alex. Not now, not this year though. At the very least, it's like okay, I kind of get it, but also maybe their guards up a little bit too. So
last season, coming into it, Aaron Bummer was like the 6th or 7th man in this bullpen,
which is kind of crazy, honestly. But
yeah, and now he's 3rd or 4th, depending on where he's going to fall in the pecking order. I think that's just kind of shows and. Obviously, the Braves don't know what's going to happen. They were banking on A.J. Minter a year ago, and he barely pitched because of the hip injury. And they also got really good innings out of guys who maybe they weren't expecting to be very good. It really is a tough proposition to predict what a bullpen is going to do. Again, a little more encouraged than I was maybe a month ago with the options in the system to navigate at least until July when you can bolster at the trade deadline. And hopefully over the next couple of weeks down in Florida, the relievers continue to perform well. And frankly, maybe make the Braves have to make a tough choice because you can only carry 8 in that bullpen, maybe even 7 if they're going to go with a de facto 6-man rotation early in the year. It might be tough. Someone's probably going to get squeezed off and is going to be released because he wants to go pursue a big league opportunity elsewhere. And that's something we'll have to cross that bridge if and when we get there.
This one's for the old heads of our podcast, but I'll just say the words bullpens are volatile and we'll move right along. That's an old standard on this podcast. And this is different, by the way. It's a different show altogether. We'll probably do again between now and March 27th about the 6-man rotation and check-ins on Ian, which I know they talked about Friday night, and Smith Shawver. That's coming, just not on this show necessarily. Elsewhere in the rotation, I guess on Sunday the Rays actually used 2 starters. So Saturday was like a bullpen game almost. Today we saw Lopez and Schwellenbach, which was I don't know about you. I didn't know Schwellenbach was pitching today. I just saw Lopez was going and okay, and then Schwelly threw 3 innings in the middle of the game, which was a nice surprise. Looked fantastic. He is, I think, fantastic at this point in time. Lopez is a little bit more concerning, not like terrifying, but he's not hitting his spots the way he has been. Last year, one of the things about Ronaldo is that he just didn't walk anybody at all, and that allows you to kind of like float a little bit. And I think we all know his ERA in particular was not sustainable last year. It was like in the ones most of the season. That wasn't going to happen again. But any concern with Lopez and his command, aka 3 walks, and I think in 4 innings so far?
Yeah, I mean, I watched most of Sunday's game. Ronaldo just didn't have fastball command. He kind of battled through the first inning and then actually didn't make it through the second inning. He left after 44 pitches in total and got 2 outs in the second. It wasn't bad, and the velocity is still good, but clearly he's still trying to find his command, and he is by no means alone in that endeavor across the league.
Yeah, it's early.
So hopefully, as we get a little deeper into the spring, Ronaldo looks a little bit more like himself. And then, dude, Spencer Schwellenbach. I mean, we talked briefly on the last show that he might be a dark horse for some Cy Young votes at the end of the season. It might not be crazy, Brad. I mean, just his stuff is so good. His command is so good. He pitches like a guy who's been doing it at a high level for a decade, and he was in A-ball a year and a half ago. He had a phenomenal plate appearance against Paul Goldschmidt, probably future Hall of Famer Paul Goldschmidt. Went ahead 0-2, busted him inside with a fastball, threw a slider just off the plate, and then dotted a 95-mile-an-hour fastball on the outer corner for strike 3. That is a perfect sequence against a very, very good hitter. And it looks easy every time Schwellenbach goes out there. 3 innings. He gave up a leadoff single, and then the ball did not leave the infield in the following 3 innings. 3 strikeouts, a bunch of ground balls. Nobody was squaring him up. I mean, he is just so impressive. And I just pray after some of the bad luck the Braves have had with guys like Mike Soroka and Kyle Wright, I just pray that his health cooperates, because he is looking more and more like a very legitimate front of the rotation, even borderline ace, if he can continue what he did in the back half of last year.
For sure. 5 innings, it's 5 innings in the spring. It's still early, but 5 innings, 2 base runners allowed, 5 strikeouts, no runs. Like, he's just been what you would hope to see through 2 outings. And again, it's March 2nd, but we are on the same page. This is a pro Schwelly podcast. We're in.
We could say after every single sentence on this podcast for the next month.
I mean, I just want to always give the caveat, because look, always trying to balance you out, because I know you're all in. I can when you get excited, I can sense it. We've been doing this a long time. You're excited, and by the way, I agree with you. It's just notable that you're like, all right, when someone looks as good as he did today, and it excites you, as again, I'm telling some new listeners, we're not going to rant and rave about guys on March 2nd very often, and he looked that good today. Like, it's one outing in the spring, but he looked awesome. So
people who used to listen in the dark days of the rebuild back on Talking Chop, it's funny that we used to be painted in this super negative light, and it's we still get
it occasionally. We'll get the people like, man, you guys are so negative when we're like, hey, maybe they're not as good as the Dodgers. It's like, okay, then super negative. But no, you're right. We used to get that that was probably our calling card for a long time, is that we were the negative podcast, which is kind of silly, but it's just kind of the way it was. So.
Well, in like the middle of 2016, when they had lost 18 of 20, the team sucks. You want positivity in the middle of an 0-47 stretch or whatever they had at one point. Yeah. So thankfully, much better days now for the Atlanta Braves. And we try not to have too much hyperbole and bring nuance to the show if you're a new listener. Just so excited for Schwellenbach, and feels like a really good season could be on the horizon if he's healthy.
Yes, we agree. And this isn't even really needing any analysis, but I thought it was at least fun on March 2nd that Rowland Olsen went back-to-back today. It's like, oh, baby, we're here. The season's arrived.
Yeah.
The two boppers went back to back to begin the game. That was fun. And then Kelnick had home run later on in the game. But it's like, okay, just a nice little warm blanket. You see it on Twitter. You see it if you're watching the game or whatever. It's like a notification. Oh, back-to-back homers for the two guys that hit back-to-back homers a lot. That's nice.
Yeah. Yeah, the lineup has looked pretty good. Again, we'll do our March 2nd caveat, but the Braves are 6-2. I'd much rather them be 6-2 than 2-6, even if it truly means nothing how teams perform in the spring. Jared Kelnick also had a home run, which was great. Jurickson Profar just missed a home run by about 2 feet and doubled as well. He put together some nice plate appearances. So it's been a good start offensively, and the pitching staff too, for that matter. So a nice game on Sunday. I found myself watching at least the first 5 or 6 innings until the deep sleepers in the organization had a chance to play. But yeah, it was overall, it was a good weekend for the Braves. And it seems like, 3 more weeks and then we'll be closer to real baseball.
That's right. And we're recording this on Sunday afternoon, probably a little bit earlier than we normally would. I'll just note this for people listening before Monday afternoon. The Braves play Monday 1:05 against Tampa. I believe Tampa plays their spring ball in like Port Charlotte. I believe that's right. That's not down the street from Northport. So if I had to guess, it may not be the best lineup on Monday afternoon. That's just a guess. I have no idea. We're recording this early on Sunday, but it may not be the one that we talked about earlier in the podcast. It may not be the top to bottom regulars.
Yeah.
On Monday.
You don't think Austin and Matt are jumping on that team bus for a long bus ride?
I do not. If I had to guess, they probably will not do that. Oh, I'm not sure if this is a clarification or a correction, however you want to say that. I made a comment on the last show that we got a lot of actually, I was surprised how many people replied to us about this. Scott's going to laugh when I want to bring it up. I mentioned on the last show that I don't think the Braves are going to go to Arizona for spring training anytime soon. What I was saying on that show was that they were going to move their spring training operation to Arizona as a team headquartered in Atlanta. They actually do play 2 games this year in Arizona because they opened the season in San Diego. They're kind of going out there a week early and playing 2 games in Arizona. So I did know that. That's not what I was saying, but I wanted to just tell everybody, hey, I guess I could have said that better. So there you go. Yeah. Here we are on the show.
Maybe if we have any listeners in Arizona, I think I'm going to go up to those 2 games.
I was going to say you probably should go if it's close. How far is that from you? Is it Mesa? Can't remember how it's not that far.
Not far.
There you go.
Yeah, no, it's a great setup. Cubs have a really nice facility. Obviously, they sell that thing out most days, which is crazy for spring training. But yes, the Braves will journey out west. It kind of makes sense too with the time change and everything. And the first week of the regular season is going to be really, really challenging. Going out west against probably the 2 best teams in baseball a year ago with San Diego and LA, firmly believe whoever won that NLDS series was going to win the World Series. So if the Braves start out 3-4, 2-5, just tell yourself that probably the most difficult road trip they have all season long is out of the way. Much easier games on the horizon. I think they host the Marlins after that, after a day off, get right against them. But then they play the Phillies, who was also like a top 5 roster in the game last year and probably will be again. So it is a tough schedule right out of the gate. I don't hate that, Brad. I don't know about you, but especially while everyone is fresh, it is unfortunate they're probably not going to have Strider or Acuna for those 3 really tough series right out of the gate. But as we've, kind of talked about on this podcast, this is still a really good roster, even without those 2 stars in there.
No, that honestly, I would even go beyond maybe. That is their toughest series of the season. Sorry, toughest road trip of the season.
Yeah.
On paper. Because of what you just said. No Strider, no Acuna, at San Diego, at LA. And for me, LA is a team in its own tier right now on paper. And the Braves only go there once this whole year. They only go to LA once in its second series of the season. So them being on the same road trip, and I guess San Diego's a good team, not a great team, I don't think this year, but playing a good team on the road and then the Dodgers on the road, that puts you in a different class. But yeah, they could also go 5-2 on that trip.
Hey,
I wouldn't be terribly surprised. It's still baseball.
5-2. Yeah, we'll be partying in the streets. Just another quick scheduling note, which is odd. The Braves actually play 2 of their 3 West Coast trips the first 4 weeks of the season. They go out to San Diego and LA, and then they go out to Colorado and Arizona at the end of April. So I know for the East Coasters, it's not ideal. You have to stay up late, put a pot of coffee on at like 9 o'clock. But for my money, I would much rather get those series out of the way early in the year than have to do like a 10-day West Coast road trip in the end of August, which they had to do a couple of years ago, actually. That's not great. You worry about guys wearing down. You worry about just being so far away from home, all of those things. I know they're professional athletes, but historically, teams, when they have to fly all the way across the country, do not perform super well. So it'll be good to get those 2 long road trips out of the way. I think they have one more trip, but it's not till the summer months. So just a housekeeping note as we get closer and closer. I don't know. Maybe we'll do like a schedule breakdown segment.
I'm sure we'll do something the last week before the season that kind of gets into this a little bit. But yeah. Looking ahead, we're all getting excited, and then we did foreshadow this earlier in February. Like the lull is coming in spring training, the lull that we've referred to, where there's like 2 weeks where everyone is just like, all right, let's get this over with. Even I'm talking about, by the way, players feel this way, coaches feel this way, media feels this way. You get to a certain point in spring, and everyone wants it to be over. Everybody's excited for a while, then that lulls, and then at the end, it's more of an uptick back up. We're not quite to the lull yet, but we're approaching the lull, I think. Yeah. But we'll be here.
There was a video a couple years ago that caught on. It was Dansby Swanson and his now wife, Mallory Pugh, who's a professional soccer player. And she posted a video of Dansby, who was like begrudgingly packing his suitcase for spring training. And you could tell Dansby was not thrilled. I mean, like you just said, the players do not love 7 weeks of spring training.
For veterans, especially, like if you're proven already, like you got to do it. I actually think friend of the podcast at Capitol Avenue, former Braves blogger, smart guy, was just kind of laying it out like, hey, if you designed the way to prepare for the season in 2025, there's no way they would do this anymore. Spring training is a institution. And people love it. People go to games. It's a whole thing in itself. And I'm not knocking that. But if you started from scratch, you would not send your professional baseball players to Florida for 6 weeks to get them ready for the season. That's not what they would do. There's no way. So, and I kind of agree with him, but it's not going to change. It's just what it is. And part of that is if you are a proven guy with a family, you probably don't love having to go down there for 6 weeks. I can't blame anybody for having that thought. So
for sure, I mean. I'm sure Drake Baldwin is having the time of his life down there.
If you're a young guy, perfect. Prove yourself. Get at bats every day. Like it's great for sure.
Yeah, mentally focused for the year ahead. Try to win a roster spot. If you're in a camp battle, try to compete every single day. But yeah, so we'll get through spring training. We've already been talking behind the scenes about some fun episodes and shows we're going to do. Maybe some NL East previewing with our sister shows on Foul Territory with the Mets and the Phillies. We'll do a bold takes and bold predictions episode. Maybe we'll do a burning questions, things that kind of keep us up at night and concerns we really have, especially as we get closer to opening day and have a better idea of what the roster is going to be. Who knows, Brad? Maybe they'll sign somebody and add some depth to the system somewhere. But rest assured, 3.5 weeks to go until opening day. We will have plenty of content here on the show and try to keep it fun because you're right. We are about to hit the dog days of spring training.
Hey, David Robertson, come on down. If you are listening to this podcast, we have a spot for you. I'm sure they'll pay you some money. Come on down. Anyway, Scott, thank you for doing this on a Sunday afternoon. Please go ahead and tell people where they can find all of your musings. I will not bring up college basketball after last night's performance with the Arizona Wildcats, but what's going on elsewhere in your life?
I did want to say, I think for folks still listening, and God bless you, I think I'm going to try to set up a March Madness bracket tournament challenge for listeners, if they want to join. We're going to try to get some swag from the Foul Territory leadership team to give to the winners. It'll be for fun. I'm not collecting payment on Venmo or Zelle for the next however many people.
We'll call it the beat Scott Coleman Invitational. Everyone wants to beat Scott Coleman in a pick'em contest.
Not hard to do. My bracket, my wife and I have done a house bracket the last 7 years. I think she beats me every year. I might honestly just have her enter and she'll probably win. But if you are interested in that, tweet us, leave us a comment on YouTube, whatever you want to do. As we get closer, we'll publish the heck out of that link and it'll be open to anyone to join. But again, I think a lot of our folks, a lot of SEC listeners, which is a just phenomenal basketball conference now, which is, it's that ACC, Big 12, Big 10. You're a big Michigan man, Brad.
That's right.
Everyone. And March Madness, for my money, it's the best sporting event in the world. But yes, nothing else to plug on this show. You can find me at Scott Coleman 55 on socials, and we'll be back soon with another show.
All right, you heard the man. Please subscribe to this podcast anywhere you find your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Overcast, Podbean, all these places. I could name them all, and I won't. But also on YouTube, as Scott just alluded to. You can like the show there as you're watching it, and also comment, tell your friends. We definitely that's the way to grow the show. Honestly, we don't do a whole lot of like organic. We're not paying for uh, Google ad space. It's word of mouth. Hopefully, you will help us spread the word on social media to your friends, to your family. We definitely appreciate that. And we'll have more coming up later this week. I promise you. Follow the show on Twitter/X at Hammer Territory. Follow Scott at Scott Coleman 55. Follow me at BT Roll if you want to. And without any further delay, we'll sign off now. Enjoy March, everybody. We're here. We're here. There's more. There's baseball. Baseball this month. Baseball this month that counts. 3.5 weeks from now, and we'll see everybody next time.